Hello, welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today I'm sitting down with Hannah V. Warren, who's a poet, translator, and Fulbright scholar. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Kansas and is currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Georgia. Her writing and research interests focus on the grotesque, apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic narratives, and representations of alterity, which you can see for yourself in her collection of poetry, Slaughterhouse for Old Wives' Tales, out now from Sundress Publications, and her work in Crazy Horse, Gulf Coast, Passages North, and Fairy Tale Review. Her current creative projects include a poetry manuscript that explores the relationships among abjection, gender norms, and the Southern Gothic, along with a speculative novel that considers ritual and apocalypse from a monstrous perspective. So sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
Hi, my name is Hannah V. Warren. I'm so excited to be here today and read Young Girls Find Familiarity in Dead Things. This museum is a Jurassic wilderness where the grisly parts are artificial craters, imitation nectar, and polyp detail. You're here so often, you sometimes forget all ferns aren't machine-snipped echoes made from the same melted plastic as the moldy gumball machine at the front desk. You stare into the wide-jawed throat of Allosaurus, see how her tongue once pressed her top palate, rapture of warm bones and acrylic polymers. Barely more than juvenile, her body is similar to yours, not quite formed, somehow unformed in the ways that matter most to her mother. At home, you pinch your cheeks in the mirror and tuck curling hairs behind your ears, bend a gap between your shoulder blades, render your marrow thin and supine. Imagine shaving away hair in all your hairless places. Wet-knuckled and tense, you reach for the Allosaurus's carved snaggle teeth. This is your inheritance. If you pull hard enough, her skeleton could come apart. Synthetic medullary bone tissue seeping, your hand smoothing hard brows. You run back to your mother, waiting unhorned by the fossilized eggs. Breathe thirst to touch the high glint of another's young. She searches in her little purse and asks where you left the ground beef coupon. She asks why you can't remember to do anything right. The bones on the museum floor behind the do not cross tape. Fragment in structured piles, polished for display but unlabeled. This level of detail can mean only one thing. Today you learn to unbutcher the monster, to bind the unwound. Left alone while your mother searches for a reason to stay, or your father's voice thrown halfway across the country, you force the bones together. Skull piece, rib slice, curved spine, ankle garnet. Some are smaller than your thumbnails. Bone chips separating in a downpour 150 million years ago. You imagine how the rain would slick the scales of Thecodontosaurus, washing off oil and loam. Did she open her mouth to the sky and taste the cool spring? Crouch in fear beneath the brutal lightning burst. Your young sorrow is a thickness in your chest, saccharine and forked, numbing stench of mildew. You slip a pockmarked bone into your pocket, later dream of blood meal and a clouded sky. The Bone Wars. Now semi-arid but once coastal plain, the land crawls with stone-washed bones, empty eye sockets, and shattered femurs. Bodies hunched with a constricted ancient grief, lined up like the horrific photographs you carry in your back pocket. Strange maps fall from gaping rib cages and sprout new growth beneath your fingertips. You can salvage only that which has died painfully. Flash, then nothing. Flesh, then nothing. No more than inches beneath the pallid soil, two dinosaurs drowned, locked in each other's mouths, saliva jaws keyed together, their teeth mostly intact, but their spines cloud brittle. You slide your finger through their joints. This fluid authority is the closest thing you felt to baptism. You can almost taste the way they dehydrated in the sunburnt muck, dust piling sticky on their feathers. When you were young, you collected bones from dead animals. You brushed away ants and soaked the shards in rubbing alcohol until soft down or fur pulled away. You hid this nothingness, this immoral integrity from your mother. Practice pasting the white corners, jaunt angles, imagined their muscles drawing taut. Last week, your mother gripped your shoulder and said you would never be young again. Now you uncover the bones, throwing pine boughs to the side, crawl into the hole with the skeletons, lay the softness of your neck against terrible claw. You fissure as you rest, and you know the morning will bring nothing new. Lost blowflies swarm your hair, dim pulps crawling the lines of your ears. Propagating the tendons in rheumatic joints. You crush the root hair of bluebell against your cheek. Press it on your wounds, the gash in the soft of your earlobe, claw marks on your hips. You bear the rich laugh of a Bible salesman and wonder what about yourself is real, or what parts sustain fiction. The bulb glues your hands together and you pray, steepled violets sticky. Plucking ticks from their flesh burrows, this is how you stitch skin for a map, leading to what comes before the body in unbelievably destructive dimensions. You compress royal fern, fold in all the leaves, faint smoke smell inside your chest, and you burn into the woodland, propagate pulpy torso. Wind blows seeds in your ears, blossoms sprout in your rib cage, a cornucopia of Southern Gothic materials, stem and bulb and swamp, unconscious but writhing in their contaminated streams, unaware of their auxiliary mouths. Macabre homecoming. We've all heard stories of people who've turned back, looked around, looked over their shoulders, their eyes crusting with salt, their hands slipping nimble as their wife's hair turns to flame. What's happening here is something different. You can't look back because there's nothing to find. Only revival in a gap in the king cake where the infant Christ melted into a puddle of multicolored wax. Your eyes will waver over an emptiness, and you'll remember when the vacant lot was once a gas station or a paper mill or your grandmother's childhood home, but all the insides are gone. You'll want to crack the streets in half, letting the sunlight burn the earth for the first time in years, to plant a centuries-old forest in your lungs, alienated and disturbed and gorgeously decomposed. I'll read one more and then call it done. Slipping between dimensions and the world ends. I know what you're thinking, but there is no happy ending. We will not gather as one, our hands over our salivating mouths, our eyes thin as paper. We will not come together arm in arm. We will not photograph ourselves, our hair braided with oil and water for future evolutionary bipedals to caress. We will claw slick earth. We will bury ourselves like moles and live beneath the ground, afraid and alone. We will lose our sight, our trimmed fingernails. We will grow elongated muzzles, furred bellies. Armageddon is already here, living inside our womb's spongy lining, the rotten pear skins, the leftovers of a swift's nest. If this ending were a serpent, it would have already swallowed its own tail. It isn't predator or devil or extraterrestrial. I know you feel you can disappear sometimes, and isn't that enough? Other versions of ourselves propel us as we gorge on the dead. Their good deeds syrup on our fingers. Thank you.
Wow, Hannah, your poetry really is a delight for the senses. In a lot of poetry, you'll get visual images or maybe you'll get auditory images, but in your poetry, you have all of that and there are a lot of smells. We've got the mildew, we've got the smoke, and as well as the taste of like the dehydrating dinosaurs. That image really sort of stopped me for a second in just a wonderful way that you love poetry to do. So thank you for that great reading today.
Thank you.
My first question for you is I'm interested to know what book or author has created the most mayhem in your life?
I love this question. And I also love that your brief introduction about taste and smell kind of gives me a direct answer to this as well. So I am consistently reading Anna Tsing's book Mushroom at the End of the World. And I think a lot about her introduction, which talks about the matsutake mushroom and how this mushroom has such a specific scent for people who love it and everyone else absolutely hates it. But this mushroom only grows in Korea because of devastation from war and deforestation. And so it has this rich, rich history for people who fell in love with something that was based on imperialism and colonization, but it's become a part of the culture now. And so that book in particular caused mayhem for the way that I describe things like taste and smell inside my own work because I think about it all the time. It's something that I reach for when I'm teaching intro creative writing classes. It's something that I recommend to other writers because it not only gives us that sense of really important description, but also how things like touch and smell are culturally relative. And so how they change across time and space, depending on who you are and the object you're interacting with.
Wow. Um, how did you come across that? Do you remember how you first came across that book?
I actually do. So I think a great deal about lineage inside my writing and the many different people who have taught me over the years. I think the first time I came across that book was in my MFA in poet Megan Kaminsky's graduate poetry course. And so that was 8 years ago. And I have been reading it at least once a year since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. That was baby poet Hannah still trying to figure out exactly what was going on, as I'm still doing, but maybe a little less so now.
And you said it was the mushroom at the end of the world? Is that
Yeah,
okay? I'm writing that. I'm gonna write that down.
it's incredible. It's not a poetry book in the least bit whatsoever. It's a like cultural exploration, but it does so much for talking about the importance of language in terms of all of our senses.
Yeah. Um, Excellent. And this will seem sort of like a weird thing. You're saying some very deep things, and now I'm gonna say something not quite so deep. But have you
Oh, I'm so
seen
thrilled.
there's the Instagram account that does covers of poetry books as fungi?
As fungi.
Yeah.
Yes, I love them so much. It's always a delight.
Have you submitted your cover to them yet?
I have not, but maybe I should. Like, who knows what would come out? The cover is already so weird and nature centered. I would love to see a fungus that looks like an alligator skull.
Wow, that almost sounds like a line of poetry in and of itself. A
A
fungi
mushroom
that
that
looks
looks
like
like
an
an
alligator.
alligator skull.
Yeah. Nice. Well, you mentioned a little earlier, you were talking about baby poet Hannah coming across that book. What advice would you have for a younger you?
I think my advice for a younger me would be to kind of chill out a little more about poetry and stop looking for a direct explanation for everything I write. That's something I still struggle with a lot now. I'm a project person. And so the book that I'm working on now, the project that I have in mind that's coming next, I'm consistently working toward a goal. And one of my current preoccupations is trying to stamp that down a little. So inside this book, I look a lot at dinosaurs. I'm thinking about divinations. I'm thinking about my own connections to the Southern Gothic. And so I created this character who's kind of me, but kind of not me. And so I'm working within a narrative inside this poetry book. And that's something that I really loved for Slaughterhouse for Old Wives' Tales. And I think it worked really well for me and it guided me very clearly throughout these poems. And I also look forward to shaking some of that up a little bit in my future poetics. And so I think if I were looking back to younger poet Hannah, who was just starting to figure out how to connect poems together to create something that looked like a manuscript, to maybe say it's more okay to have loose lines between things or maybe lines that are kind of opaque.
Ah, can you let me think how to phrase this.
Of
Because it's
course.
okay, it's okay if you can't. Can you think of a poetry collection that you love that you think really gets to that opaqueness and has sort of those unconnected lines and is working well?
Yeah, so right now I'm starting to get deeper into translation, which has been incredibly fun for me. So I'm translating this German poet right now named Alexandra Bernhardt. Some of those poems are available now and they're awesome. Highly suggest looking them up. She's a phenomenal poet, but she's talking about the larger European identity and European history and how it's really, really difficult to pull together strings that define what a European is, which is fascinating. And so her poems have Middle High German, they have some Polish, they have some Spanish, they throw in English words every now and then. So the language in and of itself is telling us that identity is not stable, identity is really fluid. And so I think that her book, just by nature of what it's doing, doesn't have that many through lines because it's pulling from so many different directions. But overall, as a whole, it makes this really intensive and beautiful narrative that says that it's impossible to do so. It's impossible to have that one narrative. It's incredibly nice.
Wow. Um, is she is she a contemporary poet? I don't know if you mentioned her
Yes.
time.
Yeah, she is living in Vienna right now. She's a contemporary poet who has quite a few books out there, all in German. But if you read German, have a great time. If you don't read German, I am trying to push them out right now in English.
Oh, that's great. Have you I'm gonna put in a little plug here. Um,
Yeah,
have you submitted any of them to the Dodge?
I have not, but Action Books has published a few. Should I send some to the Dodge?
Yeah, send some to the Dodge.
Okay, I sure will. Thank you. Let me write that down real fast.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, the Dodge does translations, and we get a lot of translations of contemporary fiction folks that are being
Uh-huh.
submitted. Um, or we'll get a lot of poetry that's sort of um older poetry. And so
Yeah,
it would be
not
great to get
contemporary.
some submission from contemporary poets. I'm just a
Yeah,
reader.
I'd
I
love to.
have no power over anything except to say if I like something or not,
Yeah.
but it sounds like her work would be great to take a look at.
Oh, it's so monstrous and so weird. It leans into speculative, it does some fairy tales, and then all of a sudden it's saying something about contemporary German politics. It is bananas and so beautiful.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to being able to read some of those translations.
Me
I do
too.
I, yeah, I do I do German on Duolingo to try to refresh my high school German, but I'm not, you know, I think right now it's a lot of stuff about the Krank house, right? Like it's like
Yes.
I'm in the hospital section different ways to say I have a headache or I don't have a headache anymore.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my German
I know. Important for travel, must say.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Where is the library as a traveler? Maybe not as useful. Where is the hospital? Peak useful.
Right. Yeah, I haven't gotten to anything about like what's your health insurance situation like, any questions like that that Americans tend to ask. And
Yeah.
you're traveling right now. You're in the UK somewhere, right?
Yeah, I'm in Oxford right now on the ground while some of the students at the University of Georgia are doing a study abroad. So it's giving me a great space to work on my dissertation, try to get some of these translations done. I'm working with a scholar here who does German translation. So it's been really lovely and also really exhausting.
I can imagine. Are all the students are doing well? No tragedies to deal with or anything, or
One of them melted a plastic bin in the oven somehow. So all of a sudden things were on fire in the kitchen, and I think it was like the bottom of lasagna container that they just like didn't take the plastic off because they don't know how to use ovens. But then they also put it directly on the bottom of the oven instead of on a rack.
oh.
They're the brightest and the best students, right? So they all had to apply to this program at the University of Oxford and get in. And so they're brilliant, but being brilliant on paper doesn't mean you know how to use an oven, which was news to me. And so that was fascinating.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you were there to help calm that situation down and get
I don't really
everything.
know if there was anything to do other than just keep the oven closed and turn off the fire alarm and then watch someone clean it out later.
Sometimes that's all you can do, right? Metaphor for
Yeah.
everything. Sometimes all you can do is shut the oven door and clean it out later.
Yeah, I grew up in a very religious space, and my partner and I always joke when something bad happens, we're like, we're going to give it to the Lord. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, we're just going to give it to the Lord. Neither one of us are in any kind of religious affiliation now, but it just like warms our Southern Gothic hearts to say, give it to the Lord. So we gave the oven smoke to the Lord.
There's some um I have I have feelings about AI, but there was one instance that it was hilarious. Somebody used AI to generate an image and it was Jesus and all the wheels he's taken. And it's like a bunch of wheels tacked to the wall, like deer mounted heads sort
Like,
of thing. Yeah. That's what I
give it to the Lord.
right, give it to the Lord. Jesus, take the wheel.
That's incredibly
Um,
funny. I like that. There's this Instagram account called Deconversion Podcast, which is one of the funniest accounts I've ever seen. That's specifically for people who grew up in like American traumatizing religion that has all these little just like shitty memes, and they're delightful. This would be the type of meme that's on Deconversion Podcast Instagram.
oh, I'll have to check that out. I did not grow up in any it was very complex. My when I was at my
Yeah,
grandmother's at Granny's, I went to church and had that
of course.
experience. But my mom would say things like if my brother was mean, she would say, "Don't worry about it. His karma's going to catch up with him." So they're kind of different.
We had some mixing,
Right. Right.
a little multi religion pop.
Yeah. So do you have time while you're at Oxford? Do you have time to make day trips and go places or do anything, or is it all focus?
Yeah, I'm spending a good amount of time just taking in what I can about my field of study. So, my background is in monster theory. So, the ways that we look at monsters and see what people were afraid of historically when they made them. And so, if we're looking at someone like Frankenstein, which is always my go to example, So Dr. Frankenstein made his monster out of multiple pieces that were kind of like turned into a mechanized body. And at the time of Mary Shelley's writing, we were in the like industrial revolution, right? We were post Enlightenment. And so we had these enormous fears of machines taking over humans in very specific ways and people losing their embodiment. And so Dr. Frankenstein's monster is a direct representation of that loss of embodiment. And so while I'm here in Europe, I'm thinking a lot about monsters that are different than the ones that I grew up with. Also, monsters that are different than the ones that I studied in Germany, where the German Gothic kind of birthed the Southern Gothic eventually. And so that's research that I've done before, is tracing Gothicism from my homeland, which is South Mississippi, to the German Gothic stage to see what's happening over there and the monsters that are trickling between. And now I'm doing a bit of that while I'm in England, which is really lovely because there's a monster exhibit right now that's like 20 minutes away by train in a very uninteresting little town named Reading, but the museum is cute and delightful. And it has an exhibit on the history of monstrosity. And so it has a few contemporary artists, a few long gone artists, some original manuscripts by different people who have talked about me in the past. So that's been really lovely just to have that basis for my research in front of me in places like that. And also I'm in Oxford, so I have access to, the Bodleian, one of the best libraries on planet Earth, where they have everything you could possibly imagine. And so I've just been sitting in a little dark hole a lot doing my research.
Well, a dark hole seems to be an appropriate place to be thinking about monsters, so that
it does, right? Yeah, they like dark holes.
Well, if that, I'm gonna thinking back to that baby Hannah, if she could see you now and the things that you're doing now, what advice do you think that she would give you, or what kind of reaction do you think she'd have?
So I thought about this a lot in the past year because like I've made a lot of wild choices. I moved to Germany for a year. I'm here in England for a while. I keep threatening my husband that I'm going to get another degree in like biology or translation theory just for funsies when like the job market ultimately just goes haywire. Um, and so there are some things that are just so far outside the scope of what I could imagine when I lived in South Mississippi that I really don't have any reaction to it. It's just like this numbness, right? Because it's kind of shocking. So when I graduated from high school, I went to a junior college because I desperately needed to save money, and then went to a senior college, and then started realizing somewhere at like 2021 that the world was bigger than South Mississippi. And so it took a while for me to expand that view. And I think that what I didn't expect is that community and small communities would become even more important to me than I thought they would. And so that was so important to me when I was younger, coming from a town of like 1,000 people in South Mississippi. And when I left that place, I didn't think I could find anything like that again. And so I think that small Hannah would be delighted that I have found community and small, really important communities, no matter where I have gone, no matter where I've landed. And that's been wildly important to me. And so I think that small Hannah would probably tell me, like, find people. And I'm proud that I have done so, especially in the writing community. Like, people can be pretty awesome. And that's, I don't know, it's incredible. Over here in Oxford, I have a pressmate in town. So someone who also published with Carrie and Bloom Books works here, and she does translations, and we're getting a drink tomorrow. And that's incredible that the world has so many people, but still we have these little thin threads of connections between all of us.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I like that advice. I like that advice a lot. So this is gonna be really random. Some of
Okay.
them have just been sort of choppy choppy segues. This is completely random. because you have such a strong connection to Europe, do you follow Eurovision?
I don't. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I will say that the worst day of my entire life was when my partner was watching Eurovision with a friend and I got deathly ill. I had like food poisoning or something. And so I could hear them singing in the background as I was like vomiting in the bathroom. Maybe you don't include this.
Is it okay if I do? Because I think that's fast. I think that's
Oh,
a
I don't care.
fascinating image. It's. Do you remember what year it was, or what?
No. I had no idea what was happening, but we decided like let's do it, and then like food poisoning hit immediately, so we gave that up really fast.
Oh yeah, I can see that. My husband and I have become a little more obsessed with Eurovision over the last few years, and like we're even following people's national finals and have like strong opinions about, how we feel like Finland is not coming with anything strong this year, but Norway's got some hard decisions, right? Like it matters what we think over here.
Yeah, I've seen the Will Ferrell movie. Does that count?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's basically the same thing as watching the show, yes?
You do get all the highlights and all the sort of main vibes. So I think, yeah, it it works. It works. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming in today and talking with me about your work and about fungi and community and all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. This was so lovely. And thank you for dealing with my weird timeline across the earth. This was so great. I really look forward to chatting with you again.
Excellent. My pleasure. What a fun interview that was to do. I feel like I'm going to be walking around feeling sort of creepy and monstrous the rest of the day, but in the absolute best way possible. I will put some links down below, not only to Hannah's work and her new collection, Slaughterhouse for Old Wives' Tales, out now from Sundress Publications, but also to some of her translations for Alexandra Barnhart's work, so that you can check that out as well. Thanks for stopping by.